Hi, fools. I'm Lou Whiteman. I'm joined today by Jim Cantrell, CEO and co-founder of Phantom Space Corp. We talk a lot about the new space economy around here that has bloomed in recent years. It isn't an exaggeration to say that Jim was there from day one. He's been involved in SpaceX. He's been involved in a lot of other things through the years. He's got a fantastic perspective on what's going on right now, where we go from here to the moon, to Mars. We'll see. Jim, first off, thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Lou. It's always good to talk to you guys.
Awesome, awesome. So I want to get into Phantom in a minute and kind of what you're up to now. But first, you have got a fantastic origin story as far as how you got to here. I don't want to contrast it with Peter Beck, but Peter Beck with Rocket Lab seemingly wanted to be a rocket guy before he could walk. From your book, your path was different to here, but I'll get in there too. So kind of, please, a brief overview of your career, kind of how you got to right here.
Yeah, well, thanks for giving me an opportunity to tell that story. I was raised in a very underprivileged environment in a little town in California outside of Los Angeles on a chicken ranch. And, neither my parents nor their parents ever went to the university, so no dreams of that. And I grew up spending my spare time building things in the barns because we had chickens and so forth, and other farm animals, and I always just liked to build things, and I was particularly drawn towards anything that moved, particularly cars. And at a very young age, I started building go-karts because we lived on this hill, and we had a driveway that went downhill, so I used gravity, and then later I stole the engine out of my dad's lawnmower and used that, and then that eventually grew into this lifelong passion of racing cars, which I still do, right? And it consumes an enormous amount of my time and my money, and unfortunately I have a very understanding spouse who very much supports it, but this whole passion for building things is what eventually led me into space. I always liked space, but I wasn't a space junkie by any means. I love Star Trek, by the way, and in fact I wouldn't even see Star Wars for the first 10 years after it came out because it was some sort of poor imitation, I thought. But I got interested in science because I saw this series called Cosmos that Carl Sagan had put together on PBS, and that got me vaguely interested in it. I eventually ended up moving to Utah and went to university there, and was in electrical engineering. Why? Because I built a stereo system, my other passion, music. And when we couldn't afford it, I just decided to build one. And I was actually eventually successful at it, but I was a really poor electrical engineer, really failing. I mean, I was about to get kicked out of the university, and one of my friends said, "Look, you're a gearhead. What are you doing in electrical engineering? You need to be mechanical." So I switched over, was very successful at that, and then came the moment. Every life, if you look back on your life, you have these moments where everything changed. And mine was when I saw this poster in the hallway, which invited me to come apply for a design class sponsored by NASA. And they were going to design a rover on Mars, or for Mars. And my imagination lit up, right? Having been the car guy all my life, and imagine, my go-karts on Mars. And so I applied, was accepted, and I guess I probably was an overachiever because I spent all my spare time designing the Mars rover, and we eventually won the competition with small schools like Caltech and MIT and places like that.
Heard of them?
And so these hayseeds from Utah State University took the championship, so to speak, and I ended up at JPL on an internship because of that, working on a Mars balloon. And that ended up being very interesting because this was in the mid-'80s when the Soviet Union was going through its, and those of you who don't remember, I'm sorry, but the Soviet Union was our boogeyman of our era, but they were opening up to the rest of the world, and some of the people I was working with at Caltech in particular were dealing with them, and they wanted to bring the Soviet Union and the U.S. together, bring peace to the world, all these sort of things. I was just morbidly curious about the damn communists, as I called them, and I got to know them, and the French Space Agency was involved in some of these discussions, and they were also doing a Mars balloon, which I was working on for NASA. So I invented something that the French Space Agency had to have for their mission, which was a joint mission with the Soviets, and I went to France in the late 80s for about 3 years. I was at the French Space Agency working with the Soviets on a Soviet mission to Mars. And then came another one of these moments when the Soviet Union dissolved. I happened to be in the country, and a lot of interesting tales. I read my book, Breaking All the Rules, if you want to learn more. But we ended up seeing the project come to pieces because all the funding dried up on the Soviet side. I came back to the U.S. Nobody would hire me because I was considered a traitor of sorts. I don't know if it was because I worked for the French or the Soviets more that was considered a traitor, but my major professor from Utah State hired me back because he knew I wasn't, and he ended up bringing me to the next phase, which was getting me involved with the U.S. government in some of our intelligence agencies and going back to Russia. So that's kind of how I got into the space business. There are a lot after that that's interesting, but you look back on your life and you just see these moments where everything changes.
Yeah, yeah, and tell me if I'm wrong, but the Russia connection was kind of key to you ending up. Is it fair to call you one of the founding employees of SpaceX? You were there basically from the beginning, correct?
Yeah, I was there before the beginning. I mentioned going back to Russia, so I worked under what ultimately was a Defense Intelligence Agency program to help stop brain drain from the Soviet Union. I mean, once the empire dissolved, you have all these nuclear weapons, you have the materiel for it, you have the scientists who know how to build them, the ICBMs that can launch them, and all the people that know how to build them. We had a problem on our hands here in the United States because it was the wild, wild west over there. Nothing was guarded because the Soviet Union, the guns pointed inwards from the border to keep things in and people in. Once I was gone, it was everything was for sale. So I spent about 6 years over there, off and on. We converted some ICBMs to satellite launchers, which incidentally ended up becoming the commercial space market in the early 90s. We built some satellites, joint missile defense, all these things unthinkable in today's world, right? We got in to see nuclear weapons manufacturing capabilities. We sort of secondhand discovered some loose nuclear material behind a padlock in Kazakhstan, and that was swept off under Project Sapphire, and hired all the right people. We thought, a lot of that got through the net, and when you see parades in Pyongyang, I recognize some of the stuff that got through our net. Back then, nothing's complete. But all this led to a phone call I received in the summer of 2001, minding my own business on a Friday afternoon, driving home. My phone rings, and it's this funny sounding voice from somewhere in the colonies. I didn't really know where. It wasn't UK, right? But it was not American or Canadian, and it ended up being Elon Musk. I thought his name was Ian Musk, by the way. That's how the accent came across. So I said, hey, look, I got the top down. I'm going to be home in a little bit. I'll call you back. He says, fine. So I got home, said hi to the kids, went into my office and called him back, and I got a fax machine. And it was, he'd said to me, look, I'm this internet entrepreneur. I thought he said billionaire, but maybe he didn't. But at any rate, he claimed to have a lot of money. I thought, yeah, sure, fax machine is your phone. So I didn't call back. Put it in perspective. In those days, I got a lot of calls from these guys who made money on the internet, and they just didn't know what to do with it. It seemed like they wanted to blow it on space, So I was one of these guys that, because of my position at the university lab, we were free to consult. So I did. I consulted for a lot of them. Gross Brothers, their Idea Lab. I took them over to Russia and so on, and some other names I won't use, who thought there were aliens out there, and I worked with them. And then here's Elon. He piles into this this train wreck of people that want to do this. And so I thought, well, maybe he's one of those guys. And so about 20 minutes later, the phone rings again, and it's Elon, and it's another number, and he's pissed off, and because I didn't call him back. And I said, look, I got your fax machine. Oh yeah, okay, that's what I use so people can't get a hold of me, right? Well, it worked. So at any rate, he wanted to come to my house the next day. I didn't even know who this guy was, right? I had never heard of PayPal. I'd never heard of any of this stuff. And, I'm pretty technically adoptive, and I didn't know any of this stuff. So, I lied, and I said, look, I'm sorry, I'm not available tomorrow, because I didn't want him in my house. I didn't know if he's a crazy man or whatever. He's going to fly private to this little airport in Logan. And I said, look, Sunday, why don't we just meet in Salt Lake City, because I got to fly out, and we'll meet behind security. And I did that because I knew that he couldn't pack a weapon behind security, and this was pre 9/11, so you didn't have to have a ticket to go behind security. And then there were police nearby, so I thought this is a fair thing to do. So that's where we first met. So I spent Saturday, on my Earthlink dial-up internet looking up, this guy whose name is Elon, not Ian. And I actually like cars, and I found out about PayPal, signed up for PayPal, got my free $10 with my PayPal account and all of that. So that ended up being my intro to Elon, and again, the book goes into a lot more details, but we made several trips over to Russia, and we tried to buy Russian rockets for this mission to Mars he wanted to do. He wanted to show that humanity can make the trip to Mars. And the original idea he had was to send mice, but we convinced him into, if you really want to excite the public, go grow a plant on Mars with carbon dioxide, and give people the idea that someday we could terraform Mars. And so it's always been about Mars for Elon. That's one thing most people didn't understand for a long time. I had executives from very big corporations that everybody knows who they are, if I said their name, who wanted me to help destroy him. They literally thought that he was after them. I said, no, he's after Mars. They paid my bill but sent me away. Didn't ever want to talk to me again. But if you look at everything Elon does today, it's about Mars, right? The Boring Company. It's to bore underground on the moon or Mars and live in it. That's the most easy way to do it. If you're going to drive around Mars or the moon, you're going to do it in an internal combustion Mazda? No, you're going to drive a Tesla. On and on and on. The robotics, everything's about Mars. Once you put that filter on it, it begins to make sense. But other than that, it seems like something only a madman's doing. And we were accused of that in the early days. So yeah, when we formed SpaceX, I was the first vice president of business development. And I was there for, I don't know, all told I was with Elon 18 to 24 months. And, I just didn't think it'd be successful. I know I was deeply wrong, but I also, look back on it and realize that I would have had to have been a different person to survive that. I don't want to say anything bad about Elon because I greatly admire the guy, but he is difficult to get along with. So, and I got a sort of a way about my life that I don't like to take orders from people. So I set about doing my own thing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And anyone, and I appreciate the kind of deep dive, but anyone, Jim mentioned his book, and I'm a Cold War kid too. He mentioned dial-up internet, but there is a lot of really neat, just, I don't know, part spy versus spy, but it was the Wild East, not the Wild West, and just
right.
There for that. All right, let's move on though. I know you've done a bunch of things between here and then and now, but let's talk about, I said you're founder and CEO of Phantom Space, a kind of really interesting company in the fact that you seem to be going about business without doing press releases daily, which is, I'm not going to say it's an anomaly in the space industry right now, but it sort of goes away. But so what is Phantom Space? What are you trying to do? And where are you in the process?
Yeah, Phantom Space, we founded in 2019 to transform the space business, the space market, from this Cold War, nation-state dominated, hardware-centric business to make it a digital economy. And we think that transition will unlock billions of people's intellects and creativity to create a whole new economy in space, much like the internet did for the global economy, in all places like e-commerce to now what we see going on with AI and everything else. That has to happen in space. It hasn't happened. So we believe in a full stack. We think we have to have what we call sovereignty in terms of launch and our ability to build the satellites and then eventually deploy what we call phantom cloud. And so that full stack, it's a long play, and one of the reasons we're quiet, because when you talk so much and you've got a long play, you get discounted early. And we would rather be judged on what we do than by what we say. And I've been, this is my 12th startup. I've been in others where we were very noisy, and one of them didn't end very well. But by the way, I required that company, Vector, back late last year. But we think that you have to have the launch vehicle in order to have the sovereignty to place your satellites in space for any network of anything. In the future in space is constellations of satellites. So it's these distributed networks of things flying in space that can do different things. In our case, Phantom Cloud is a data center. It's a distributed data center focused primarily on the data generated in space and its unique value. Its unique value to large language models, to human activities on space, to making decisions in the future, space activities. Think of space robotics in the future. You're going to offload compute off of the robotics onto a network. Those are the things we're focused on. It also has tiebacks to the Earth. One of our recent patent applications was for self-driving cars and offloading compute onto our stack. So we're thinking about both how does this digital space impact the Earth, and how does it impact activities in space? And ultimately this becomes what we call the Space App Store. That's another patent pending idea where, like the Apple Store, users can generate their own code. It resides on our network, and they can create unique value, much like apps on your mobile phone do.
That's really cool. So the idea, I guess customers would be almost anyone either wanting access to space or wanting, as you say, the information that is gleaned from those
Correct.
going to space. That's the idea?
Yeah, that's the idea. I mean, if you want to build a satellite, you can literally take your credit card today and go buy the parts for it. You may not be able to make it work. Then you have to go to Uncle Elon or Uncle Jeff to buy a launch, or maybe Uncle Peter, and you have
Sir
to...
Peter.
Sir, oh well, I'll still call him Uncle. I knew him before he was Sir. But at any rate, you have to go deal with those guys, and it's expensive. You may end up being able to do it for a couple $100,000, but for most people that's a lot of money. So our thinking is we need to create something like Henry Ford did with the Model T, so that the average person can afford it. So maybe your children, your grandchildren, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren can put these applications in space, and they can have a space company and never build anything that goes into space. That's where this needs to go, to where billions of people can run their code in space well above our heads. We think this is an idea whose time has come finally. I've been working on it 10 years. This discussion of data centers in space is not new in my world. I've been writing patents for 10 years, started with Galactic Sky under Vector and now Phantom Cloud. And we were deliberately very quiet, to your earlier point, because time wasn't right for it. And so we've been developing the technical and intellectual basis for it for a number of years. All the while we knew that we had to develop the launch to eventually support it. So, SpaceX, for example, most people don't realize they spend 85% of their capacity to send Starlink satellites into orbit. And with Starship coming on board and 1 million satellites that Elon wants to put up for space data centers, you can bet that that's going to remain sort of the constant percentage, right? So the way to view, and this is my view of the whole space industry, the way to view this is in 10-year, 20-year blocks, and you have companies that control launch that can also do these other things. Rocket Lab's a great example. SpaceX is the best example. Others are emerging. Phantom is one of those. Those are the ones that are going to control the future in space. They're going to be like the big three, the big five in the automotive industry. 10, 20, 30 years out, but you have to take the long view. And that takes a special investor, by the way. We've had our good luck and bad luck with the Silicon Valley VCs, and their timelines are much shorter than what space is. So that's why you don't see this huge Silicon Valley VC backing this. You see more family office money, sovereign funds, money with patience, right? And we get a lot of our money from high net worth investors and their family offices because most of those guys have built these companies over decades, and they understand that that's what it takes. It takes the right people.
So I want to drill down on something you said, because I mean, we are at the end of the day, mostly public company investors, looking at equities. And you both said that in Phantom, you're playing the long game. You're thinking in decades and, kind of quietly building. But you also said that kind of now is the time, which is very intriguing to me. Like, why is now the time? There's certainly a lot of companies out there today with public valuations that, to be fair, assume a lot of growth from here. And as you say, they don't tend to have investor bases that are thinking in terms of decades. So, it's almost dangerous to say now is the time, but, it's also, I guess this is my way of asking you about like the state of the economy, space economy right now. Okay. Where are we in the process? Does this make sense to you? Does your head explode looking at what's out there today? Or
mostly my head explodes, yeah. So this is probably not kind of me. It may not be fair, but I view some of the VC games as Ponzi schemes where they're trying to create valuation drive. And I understand why they're doing it, and they're doing what's in the interest of their funds. So there's nothing wrong with it. But in a sense, it creates a different kind of business that creates bubbles. And we've seen these asset bubbles pop. We had one, in late 2019, 2020, 21 in the launch business. We saw all these companies come out. And, of course, this is the time I decided to start another launch company. And I was dealing with, okay, these guys are promising the world they're not going to be able to deliver. And guess what? Most of them are gone now, right? And so we had to take a different tactic of I believe that the capital was going to be scarce, and it has been. And over the last 2 years, it's been fairly scarce. And, we said, look, you got to parry that back with a low burn rate. So one of the things that's happening is people are getting funded. And right now, it's no longer the launch companies; it's the satellite companies that are getting funded hundreds of millions of dollars, $500 million, $1 billion of capital, investor capital, to do something that I've done personally like 3 times with a few $1 million to start it. York Space, for example, is early there. They just went public. I can't remember exactly how much they took in, but it was under $1 million. Dirk is an old friend from Spectrum Astro. It was another company I helped that started with $100,000 on Dave's kitchen table, right? And so now we've got this bubble forming with all these satellite companies. It's going to bust, I think. And the fallout's going to hit me. It's going to hit others in the business. So we just have to continue to do what we're good at and build things and create real value. And the other problem in the space business is you get a lot of these promises. I mean, you see this data systems in space discussion right now. People are going to build gigawatt data centers in space. Well, guess what? As an engineer, I'm here to tell you that is really, really hard. And if they do it, it's probably 50 to 100 years away. Unless we put nuclear power in space, which we don't have the political willpower to do today. And there are real issues with that coming back that I also am very worried about. So you've got a lot of promises. The fundamental infrastructure is not yet in place, and yet the market pull is strong. That's why you see so much capital draw into it. So we've got this incredibly wasteful part of the capital cycle paired alongside a fairly productive one, because like launch, for example, I can sell every launch vehicle I build and fly. The demand far exceeds the supply. And it's just a question of getting to that point and making it work, right? And same is true with the satellites, right? And I just don't understand these companies that are raising all this money and building satellites. And from some of the companies I helped start, like Planet IQ, they're not so happy with the satellites they bought from them either, right? So it does make my head explode. I think bigger picture, though, Lou, is we're like the New World was 500 years ago. This is a frontier. And anybody that can build a company that survives and makes money, and again, that latter part is the most important. It's got to make money, right? You have to be profitable. Let's not forget why we're in business. And anybody that can do that, though, is going to thrive long term if they don't make stupid decisions along the way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to summarize that both things can be true. The potential is great, but not everyone's a winner. I mean, we learned that even back at the .com. For every Amazon, there was an eToys. And it was pretty painful for Amazon for a while, even on the way. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the idea? It's so. I mean, just to put you on the spot, I don't want to pick on Morgan Stanley, but it's the most famous when you talk about whatever $1 trillion space economy in the 2030s. Are you? I mean, obviously, you're a believer in space, and you see the great potential here. But you're talking in decades. How reasonable is this idea that we are going to get that big, that fast, that everybody? I both agree with you that if my grandkids kind of having the access and thinking of something and not being constrained by the cost, great things can happen. I also don't know if I buy the idea that every member of the S&P 500 or something has to be in space. So I'm kind of, I don't know what to think of these projections, and so I'm curious what you think of them.
Well, so just a little bit of background on me. I did what was called the Space Intelligence Report before somebody else used that name on market forecasts for the last 20 years. After I left SpaceX, that's what I did. I took the model that we built to design out what Falcon 1 and then Falcon 5 were, later Falcon 9, and I sold that data to all the big aerospace companies for years and years and years and years. So what we've got now is, and I'm not picking on anybody in particular, but we've got a lot of guys who sort of emulate that report, but in a way that they're not embedded in the industry, and it comes from a lot of uninformed positions and a lot of analysis. Very smart people, but they haven't been doing this forever, and they don't understand sort of the molasses that slows it down. And in my era, that molasses was the government, and now it's actually capital formation, smart capital formation, and it's searching for the right idea that creates this moment that, like I described earlier, and this iPhone moment, as I like to think of it, where things change. And I think to your earlier question about why is this the time now, I think we're actually at that iPhone moment, and if it's trillions of dollars, it doesn't really matter to me, right? What matters to me is that we've got private capital and entrepreneurs who are pushing out into this. Elon's one aspect, and it's a hugely successful SpaceX endeavor and all the things around it, right? But you're talking about planetary settlement there. You're talking about like England settling the New World, Spain settling the New World. That's the scale of what Elon's doing. There's room for a lot of other people who are just saying, hey, let's make a space app store. Let's make space accessible for everybody else. I think it's the latter that actually creates that moment. And I don't mean to denigrate whatsoever this idea that we're going to create another human civilization out there, but that's a 100-year idea, right? What I'm talking about is a 10 or 20-year idea where we're going to spark this global creativity in the space domain. I look at how many smart people are in the world that aren't necessarily Americans, that aren't Europeans, that are in Africa, they're in Asia, they're all over the world, and I meet them all the time because they come to me and just want to get advice, right? And these are the people we want to enable. This is the global intellect that we want to bring to create value for our life here on the surface of Earth and eventually on Mars and the Moon, right? But that's the bifurcation that the industry is taking today, and I just see a dearth of good ideas in the applications that stay on Earth to creating things that are better for us. There's plenty of good ideas about how we defend ourselves and how we defeat the enemy, and trust me, I was in that for many, many years. But what I'm looking for is, what are those things that make my life better, right? I can get on my phone, for example, and say, oh, well, the satellite imagery shows that something's going on in downtown, and it's something for today. That's where we're going to create the value. And we can't do it alone. Like Phantom can't do it alone. We need to tap into that global intellect and that global creativity.
So we're both excited and cautious. Investors wanting to play in with these valuations. I mean, you've spent much of your career having people say, hey, you understand this better than me. What do you think? So what's your advice for investors? I mean, it is a really, really tough time or a scary time to be kind of invested in this new space economy, even if you're really excited about it. So what would be your advice? Are you day trading these rocket stocks?
Yeah, well, good question, Lou. Yeah, so in full disclosure, I own a few stocks in the space sector.
As do I.
Yeah, right. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say what they are, but at any rate, I'm small positions, right? Most of my net worth and future net worth is in the companies that I've started, right? Some are past, like ISI, I have a pretty strong position in, but it's still privately held. I think they'll go public one of these days. But, and Phantom and others. So I'm all in. Like, I'm all into the space business. But I understand it. And I talk all the time, every day, to investors, both, modest net worth to very high net worth, billionaire type people. And they all have the same discomfort with not understanding the risks. And there are a lot of snake oil salesmen, to put it that way, who come across, nice haircut, dress well, speak well, they're great at sales. And I'll say this for the younger generation, I've got 6 kids, they know how to sell, right? I think it's a byproduct of the social media exposure from the time they were little to today. They know how to sell. So you as an investor have to be able to parse your judgment of people, right? And whether or not this is a good idea, you're not going to be able to decide that, and even if you listen to somebody like me who's been in the business, I remember when Dylan Taylor came to me about York Space, he said, what do you think? And I said, don't invest in them. Dirk convinced me otherwise, because Dirk is a solid character, right? And he gets things done. So it comes down to the team. And is this a team that's done it before? Do they understand the business, and will they be able to, to carry it off long term? And it's a complicated set of skills, right? It's always a team, right? It's not just me. It's like one of my guys at Phantom is Chris Thompson. He was employee number 2 at SpaceX. I was employee number 4. We've done it before. We've done it multiple times before. So you look at that, but then you say, do they understand things that aren't engineering? Do they understand finance? Do they understand geopolitical influences and all these things that drive investors crazy? You follow the news 24/7 because you're hooked to it. So my best advice to investors that want to get into the space business is if you don't have an appetite for risk, stay out of it. If you do have an appetite for risk, invest in teams you believe in, invest in people you believe in. And the ideas almost don't matter. I won't say Phantom's changed, but this is my 12th company. But my idea of what makes a valid company has certainly changed over the years. And pivoting is not a bad thing. It's about survival.
Right. By the way, it's up to you what you want to do, but I will definitely get member comments. Why didn't you ask him what he owns? So if you'd like to say, feel free. But remember, fools, nobody gives personal advice here, so you need to do what's right for you. And Jim.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I own.
Sure.
So I own a lot of closely held stock. I'm big on ISI. I've got York Space, because I helped start York, so that's now publicly traded. I have Voyager because I know Dylan, right? Dylan and I are friends, and he's been one of my mentors over the years, and I think very highly of Dylan. I have Firefly because Jason, the CEO, is a good friend of mine, and I've known Jason since he was a snot-nosed lieutenant in the Air Force, and I first met him in a classified skiff. So I have a lot of faith. Again, it's about people, right?
Right.
And then I have a lot of closely held stocks, but those are my big plays in space for now. And I'm very bullish on ISI in particular. Those guys, when they first came to me, it's Finnish, and they came to me, 12 years ago, and said, we want to start this radar imaging company for satellites. And I said, you realize, that the United States military is going to consider this very unfriendly, you know. And they said, well, why? We don't understand. So they had this sort of, why is this wrong? They didn't want to listen to it, and they were in Finland, sort of in this unique place, and they've done really, really well.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. Well, there's a couple I want to close on, but you've kind of answered both of these, so you can go on as long, or I don't know. But first of all, what, as someone who understands this business, what are the biggest things that those of us, the tourists, or those who are excited, who are trying, what are the biggest things that would surprise us, or what are the biggest things that we get wrong? Kind of what, as an insider, what's the biggest thing that you see that maybe someone just looking in as an investor trying to understand but isn't on the inside doesn't see?
First thing I see is the sense of momentum. Investors like to follow other people because, again, the sense of risk, they don't know, so they, how can a million Frenchmen be wrong, right? Well, let me tell you the ways. And so I would say following others is probably your first way on a path to hell, investment hell, and don't do it. And second is this sense that on the founder's part or on the team's part, that their ability to, market themselves, for lack of a better term, sometimes has absolutely nothing to do with their ability to succeed. The most quiet companies often are the ones that I see have succeeded. I mean, I keep going back to them. They were very quiet. They've been around for 12 years. They've been very quiet, and they're worth $4 billion now. And Peter Beck, same thing. He was very quiet for a long time. I helped him raise the Series B, and look where they are now. I mean, they're doing fantastic. And you have to discover those gems, and you have to get in and you have to dig to do it. And probably the third thing that people will find surprising is that really there's no new technology that needs to be developed in space. That stuff's there. I mean, it's going to evolve. We're kind of like where cars are today, which is an evolutionary technology. There's nothing revolutionary. And so I found this typical among primarily the VCs, where they're looking for this magic technology that makes it work. And they use sort of software as the equivalent. And it's not at all like software. Nothing in the space business is like software. The timelines are different and so on. So really the problem is doing something that creates a profit without breaking the CapEx bank, right? And that's the secret to me, is creating that profit without having to raise hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm. And the same thing, and I think you might have answered this with what you're doing with Phantom, but whatever you want to say here, what excites you most? What is the most exciting thing about what we're doing here, where we're headed, et cetera? What's exciting about this to you?
Well, so what excites me the most about Phantom is what I think we're going to do for the human species in the sense of liberty. So, liberty is an anomaly among the human species that existed, in my view, only recently in the last several hundred years since the New World. It was a product, in a lot of ways, of the new frontier. And I see space as the next new frontier, that as we get more and more crowded on Earth, which is inevitable, and it's okay, I'm not making social commentary, but this frontier exists for our exploitation, and it's conducive for human liberty. And my view is that all good things in life stem from human liberty. If you're religious, your freedom of religion stems from it. If you're a capitalist like I am, your ability to innovate and do things. If you're a builder, you can only build if you have that liberty. And so that's what we want to do. That's ultimately why I'm in this business, is I think we can create tremendous value, we can create tremendous return for shareholders, and we can serve the higher purpose of humanity by prolonging our state of liberty that we all enjoy today.
So he said at the beginning he was a Star Trek guy, and he ends with calling space. Well, you didn't say the final frontier. You said the new frontier, but yes, that
new frontier, yeah,
that works well. Jim, this has been a real pleasure. He's Jim Cantrell, CEO, co-founder of Phantom Space Corp. We didn't even talk about all of the road racing, and that's probably that's what Jim would have rather talked about. You can probably see him on a dirt track somewhere, or like I say,
picture my car behind me.
yeah. We're not here to plug a book, but it's a really fun Gordon Reed, breaking all the rules. I have that right, right? Just kind of a moment in time. It's a Cold War story. It's a space story. It's a business story. It's a really, it's fun to talk to someone who was kind of witnessed so many of these things
Thank you.
that most
Yeah.
of us just watched.
Coming soon to a 3-part docudrama.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
I will tune in for that. When you do the IPO, please come back and visit us, or before then.
Of course.
And
We will. Yeah.
it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, Lou.